Welcome in to Cover Crimson. My name is Emily Grace McWhorter, and as always, I join Clint Lamb every Monday and Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. Central, and we've started to go live for you guys. I think we're going to have some fun with that. So grab your coffee, your tea, whatever you're drinking this morning, do a little cheers, and we'll get into all things Alabama football. Clint, how was the weekend?
It was good. NFL, no college. Still adjusting to life. Like everybody, once again, everybody complains about how late the college football season went.
Yep.
It's like first weekend without college football. How are we feeling? Or were we sick of it? Because I know I wasn't personally.
I am realizing the same thing. I will say college basketball was pretty entertaining this weekend. So my fix with college sports was there between the Alabama game as well as the Auburn game, but really just the SEC in general. It's really fun to watch. But I understand. I feel like that'll be an interesting conversation because we talked about it last show, our opinions on the college football season. Did it go too late? Clint actually brought up some interesting storylines about how would it make more sense to start earlier in the season? So earlier into August. Let us know what you guys think about that. Me personally, I was satisfied with college basketball, but I think it's going to hit me here that it is winded down, that it's officially over. But the good thing is A-Day for Alabama has been announced.
It has, yeah. And, what I love about this season is that I feel like that when you're doing college basketball and college football, it's like college football, it's the perfect complement. Like you're getting the weekly stuff. Now, granted, obviously there's Saturday games and that would conflict, if college football was still going on. But I love like the weekday games.
Yep.
And then you would have college football to kind of wrap things up or wrap up your week. I like that combination. But let's see, pulling up. So we don't have a start of the actual
game time.
We have the actual game, but we don't have when practice officially starts. So the game's going to be the 12th, correct?
Yes, April 12th. And there's no game time announced yet as well. But we do know that in Tuscaloosa, the annual A-Day game will be taking place then. I think that's also Masters Week too. So that could be an interesting day of sports for you if you're a Master/golf fan and an Alabama fan.
Yeah, I'm excited about A-Day and kind of so many storylines. Obviously, this offseason is going to be a lot more interesting because of the quarterback battle and just, you're going to have some Team Ty, you're going to have some Team Keelan. I'm sure there's going to be some Team Mac in there as well. Are you leaning one way or another as far as who you're pulling for? Or do you really care? Or, how you feel about that?
That's a good question, Clint. I haven't been able to spend as much time around these quarterbacks, obviously, because Jalen Milroe was the, definite starter these last two seasons. So I feel like I really got to know Jalen through press conferences, practices, and kind of learned more about him as a person and player. And that's what I love about my job is I get to give you guys a different angle on these guys because, I'm actually in the facilities, I'm down there, and I like to do my research so you guys know why players are the way that they are, whether it's, some childhood things, different influences. So with that being said, I'm excited to kind of get to know these players and get to know these guys. I'm excited to hear the coaches' thoughts on them. We've said it on here before. I feel like Coach DeBoer has had high praise for really all of them. So that's not really a shock here. Definitely Austin Mack is someone that, in my opinion, Clint, and we got into this on Cover Crimson. So remember, covercrimson.com is where you can find so much valuable information from Clint, from other contributors. And we really try to do a good job on there to make you guys feel like you're a part of the conversation, but give you information that you really can't find anywhere else. So make sure you go to covercrimson.com to check it out. But the question was, who is your sleeper player for the 2025 season? And we had some great answers. I feel like there was a trend with some people, but I will go ahead and reveal who mine was. And it was Austin Mack. And I feel like part of me is pulling for him slightly because of that. I just feel like, between Keelan Russell and Ty Simpson, he hasn't really been in the mix as much. But I think the comments from Coach DeBoer about him have really stuck out to me, along from some other players. His work ethic is insane. He's always in the facility. He's the first one there, the last one to leave. And what really just, I thought was really interesting was how they talked about him in the LSU game and his ability to provide the defense with incredible insight and intel on Garrett Nussmeier. And the defense had an incredible game that week. So I think that speaks really highly of him. So I'm not sure if I'm pulling for anyone in particular. I'm just really excited to start getting to know these players get to know what makes them tick and everything else in between.
Yeah, I feel like Austin Mack's from me and is getting the 2018 Mac Jones treatment.
Okay.
It's unintentional.
Yeah.
But when Tua had come in for Jalen in the second half of the national championship game and helped Alabama win, you had Jalen coming back, and he had been the starter the past 2 years. You had Tua, who had done some incredible things in mop-up duty, and that legendary second half performance against Georgia. Mm-hmm. And it's like that quarterback battle. Everybody was talking about it, and who was going to win, Jalen Hurts or Tua Tagovailoa. And I remember, catching some wind of Mac Jones not being happy that his name was not getting brought up in that conversation at all. And I said, it was one of the first, that's back when I first started doing all this. I was on a podcast and I said, look, Mac, I think that you've got potential. I think you're a good player, but you're not in this conversation. And what's funny is, in hindsight, he wasn't.
Right.
It was the other two, but I also didn't think at that particular time that Mac Jones was going to turn into Mac Jones. So whether it ends up being, Austin Mack following in a similar, in similar footsteps where maybe he's not being included in this conversation, maybe, later on, depending on what happens, with other guys, if it ends up being Ty Simpson and then Keelan ends up leaving, it might end up being Austin Mack and he might get that Mac Jones. There's a million different ways that it could work out. But, I just remember thinking that was pretty funny how, I was saying that comment and I was saying the right things. Hey, I think you're a good player. I think you got some potential down the line. But, he probably, maybe not at that time, but he probably should have been a part of that conversation more because, all three players ended up being great quarterbacks. And I think Alabama's quarterback room now, whether that it's in Tuscaloosa, I don't think all three are going to get the opportunity to be the starter like all three of those guys did. I think at least two of them are going to, but I don't know. The quarterbacks is for a different day and a different conversation. But just with it being the off season, with it being A-Day, us talking about A-Day on April 12th, it to me that's going to be the biggest storyline.
Yes,
is how and just how guys are, certain guys are progressing. And of course, when Tua was there for that spring game, everybody was super curious to see how he looked. Jalen, what kind of growth that he made. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But did you go to A-Day last year?
No, and I can't remember why. I feel like maybe we had something else through the next round, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I'm sure I'll be there this year. I do love a spring game. I feel like for us in the media, you can sometimes draw some conclusions that aren't exactly correct, but it's really that first look. And Clinton, you mentioned it, the biggest storyline is going to be the quarterback because we're going to see firsthand, who's in that role. We're going to get a lot more insight because as you guys watching know, we're going off a lot of feel right now. I wouldn't say speculation, but we're using what we know from this past season, along with some conversations that we're having to draw very loose conclusions. So we don't have anything concrete because unless you're one of the coaches or players in that facility right now, we're not privy to a lot of information. A-Day is that opportunity along with spring practice where we start getting to put some pieces together. And one of my favorite things, Clint, is always the players in the spring game that come out of nowhere. You're like, wait a second. So-and-so had a great game. We weren't even talking about him, the duration of the offseason so far. And that is bound to happen. So I'm looking forward to that. But like we said, this will be the first opportunity to get that quarterback conversation rolling a little bit more with what we've actually seen on the field.
Yeah. And one of the players or groups that the quarterbacks can be throwing the football to are the tight ends.
Yep.
That's what we're here to kind of talk about, the tight ends and the safeties. Mm-hmm. And we're going to preview it a little bit. It's still early in the offseason. I want to continue to reiterate that the season literally just ended. But with the transfer portal coming and going, you've had the early signing period come and go. We know what Alabama's tight end room, about 95% chance, is going to look like come the spring. So we can go ahead and talk about it a little bit, share some of our early thoughts.
Yeah.
And do you want to start with the tight ends?
Let's start with tight ends. I like that. And I want to ask you this first, and we'll have the chat also answer this question. What was your impressions of this group and how valuable were they to Coach DeBoer's offense this past season?
I think they were really valuable, and I think they'll continue to be valuable, but in a much different way. Not in a polar opposite way, but I don't think people realize how important the tight ends blocking were to last year's success. Now, granted, there was inconsistencies, within the offense, there were some inconsistencies within the tight end group, but it did feel like that while there wasn't a major role for any of the tight ends when it came to the passing game, it was all like timely, catch the defense off guard because they weren't utilizing the tight ends very much. You can pick some spots and get some pretty good chunk plays from that group, but being a consistent part of the offense as far as the passing game, that was kind of inconsistent as well. But just their ability to block, I think everybody was very selfless. I know CJ Dupree down at the Senior Bowl, he's looking to have a big week and prove that he's more than just what he was in Tuscaloosa, which was primarily a blocker.
Yeah.
I think he does have more pass receiving chops than a lot of people realize. I just think Jalen Milroe, for one reason or another, never really favored throwing it to the tight end much. Obviously, when you've got such a limited passing game where there's only so many targets to go around, you want to keep Ron Williams happy. You want to keep, Jeremy Bernard involved. And so I think as the passing game expands, the tight ends are going to be a massive part of that. But for 2023, they really had to adjust how they played and how they were utilized. And I think everybody bought into that, and they did pretty well with it. Robbie Oots was fantastic as far as his blocking ability. CJ Dupree was solid. Even a guy like Josh Cuevas, who was probably the best pass catching tight end of the bunch, and he's going to be coming back. His role as a blocker kind of expanded, and I think that should only help him as he's going to be the H this year, in my opinion. But as he's trying to, get a bigger role within the offense, I think him getting some of that experience, being more of a blocker, certainly is going to help.
Okay, there's a lot of things I want to break down within that monologue. I love it. The first thing is blocking. Right? You mentioned how important the tight ends were to Coach DeBoer's offense. And remember, we're going to see and I hesitate to say a majorly different offense this season, but we're going to see more of Coach DeBoer's style and what he prefers along with Nick Sheridan. Part of that is utilization of the tight ends, but blocking. Who do you feel like will fill that role? Because both Robbie Oots and CJ Dupree, that was a strength of theirs. Who do you feel like is going to come behind them and be able to execute to that level?
Yeah, and Jason kind of brought up how Alabama's going to really miss those guys at tight end. And I think it's a great question. I think Danny Lewis is going to be kind of my breakout player.
Okay.
I was super last off season, I really hyped him up. Now, I tend to do this sometimes where you see the flashes and you think, okay, it's coming. Like Justin Jefferson was one when he first got to Alabama. I mean, I was kind of, hey, I love this guy. I thought the 8A performance, his first one, was fantastic. And then the season rolls around, and then you don't really see him much. And then this past season, it's like, okay, now you start to see. Now he's starting to get more of those opportunities. Danny Lewis was probably that guy for me last year, because going into last year, I mean, I really liked what he brought to the table. I think if you're asking him to stay in and pass block and not run a route, I think he's actually effective in that area. I think he's an effective blocker. I think he's an underrated pass catcher. Is he a dynamic pass catcher? No, but the blocking is what you're asking about. And I think he's going to be above average in that sense. When he entered the transfer portal, on top of them losing Robbie Oots and CJ Dupree, I was really concerned about the tight end position, because It does really feel like Cuevas is an H. Marshall Pritchett coming in, he's going to be an H. Caleb Edwards is certainly a Y. He's kind of a blocker, but he's going to be, I'm really excited about him, and we'll get to him here in just a few minutes. But Jay Lindsey is another guy who's, an inline blocking option. But Lewis I was like, okay, Cuevas will be the biggest option at the tight end position. He'll be like the most important player as far as like in the passing game. But being the most balanced and bringing an element of kind of all of it, I think Danny Lewis is that guy. So losing him, the guys they were looking to bring in, they really needed an H inline blocker. And then you end up being able to convince him to come back instead. I thought that was a huge keep for Alabama. That would be the number one for me.
What do you think was the pitch? And we talked about this previously. Who was it? It was another episode, but the pitch to bring someone here. Well, I'll have to go check that out.
Isaiah Horton.
Isaiah Horton. Okay. So what was the pitch to keep Danny Lewis at Alabama?
The fact that, for the last couple of years, he's probably felt like he could contribute. Mm-hmm. And, we did see him at times. Like, he got the random start last year. Was it Texas? It was somebody. But he still only played like the first drive. And then you really didn't see him again. Mm-hmm. And he just, I thought he was going to be a much bigger part of things last year. He wasn't. This year, it's like, okay, I certainly think they're going to, but it's hard to utilize 4 tight ends. It really is. So, I kind of thought Robbie Utes could end up being the forgotten man because he was so limited as a pass catcher. And I just thought in Kalen DeBoer's offense, that would be more of the route that they take. But because of Jalen Milroe, once again, and the fact that he was primarily a threat with his legs, run blocking became a much bigger part of that. But I think the pitch to him is, hey, you're the starting Y tight end. Like, you might not be the number 1 tight end, but you're going to be a starter. We have visions for how we want to utilize this position moving forward, and it will certainly include featuring your position a little bit more. The tight ends in Kalen DeBoer's offense, not only does it play a big part as far as stretching defenses vertically down the seams, but also stretching defenses horizontally, getting you spread out, and that creates a lot of spacing for the receivers to work. So, having good, effective play, respectable play where like defenses have to account for some of these guys, as far as the passing game, that's going to really open up things for others. And I think that's going to be a major part of it. So Danny Lewis, I mean, I don't know if it was money that got him in the portal, like kind of like the Jalen Mbakwe where he gets approached with an offer, and then they were able to kind of bring him back or counter, or if it was just he wasn't sure about his role. They sat down with him, they had that discussion, and he felt confident, and that's why he came back. But either way, it's a massive keep for Alabama.
Before we talk about the freshmen in this group, is that a lava lamp behind you, Clint?
That is a lava lamp, yeah.
Okay.
My wife, I've been at the store with my wife multiple times. Every time we saw a lava lamp, I'm like, I never had one as a kid. I always wanted one. I think they're awesome. And for, what was it, maybe my birthday back in September, I opened up a lava lamp. And I'm not going to lie, one of my favorite birthday gifts I've ever received. So it's every bit as cool as I thought it would be.
Well,
yeah, and I don't think you can leave it on for more than like 8 hours. I've tested that a few times. Don't leave it on overnight. But yeah, it's a lava lamp, and it's one of I was like, I got to figure out how to way to get into the shot.
Yeah,
it's too cool not to.
I mean, listen, I noticed it. I'm trying to have a shot. Mine is definitely a little more girly back here. I'm trying to work on it. I'm limited space.
More adult than mine.
What's that?
More adult than mine. You're a lot younger than me, but I'm a kid at heart.
I love it. But yeah, my background, we've got some nice 38 maps right here. I didn't think we are going to get into our background descriptions today, but why not? We have some flowers. I love flowers. And then a nice lamp right here. So,
yeah. But it's aesthetically pleasing. It's solid.
Thank you, Clint. Can we give a tour of what else is behind you? The guitar?
A guitar that I do not play at all. I mean, I'm telling you, everybody always says, oh, you should pick up that. It's like a nice guitar. I had good intentions. I just decided, man, this is taking a lot longer to learn than I thought it was going to. And I don't have that kind of time. So probably should sell it, but I'm like, it looks good back there. Why not? I got that Alabama A. It's an old script A, but that is a decanter. So it's like old school. It actually used to be, oddly enough, a part of an old Alabama lamp. But that was also like you could detach that A, and it was a decanter. It's very nice. I mean,
interesting.
Never used it as a decanter, but it's a great, like, old school. The old school logo is by far the best. I mean, if you agree, definitely comment, and if you don't agree, do not comment, because I don't want anybody stepping on my thoughts or beliefs on this. But I got that as well. And then I got like a Nick Saban picture down on the floor to block some cords.
Yeah, nice. I love the discussion, and we could honestly devote maybe a whole show to this when it gets a little slower here, like in between fall camp and A-Day / spring practice, looking through old uniforms. And in Alabama, so I'm a Georgia Southern grad for those that do not know. So there's actually a lot of inspiration that Georgia Southern pulled from Alabama when it was like the Irk Russell era / Bear Bryant. And so Georgia Southern's uniforms are actually modeled after Alabama's.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're identical, except ours are navy and white.
Interesting. Well, and it's very clean, classic look. And I've always respected that. Like Penn State, their uniforms, they don't do the they're the ones that still don't do the names on the back.
Right. And so we actually, when it was Penn State was playing, this was back in December, on Twitter, I put out a comparison of Georgia Southern's uniforms and Penn State's. And I think the only difference is the helmets. Penn State's are white and then Georgia Southern's are navy. And a follower actually found the correlation between Penn State, Georgia Southern, and Alabama and the timing of all of it, but they all took inspiration from each other. way back when, and Georgia Southern nor Penn State have deviated from that. And it's really interesting because those little storylines, I feel like, get buried a lot of times. But Irk Russell, who was Georgia Southern's head coach, was a, powerhouse in the 80s, and he was good friends with Bear Bryant. And his mindset was it all goes back to discipline, and he wanted to bring that to Georgia Southern, and we still have them today. And also Penn State took some inspiration as well.
Yeah, that's very cool, because I think as like following Alabama and the way that you feel about their jerseys. I know some people want like the white helmets, and I have mixed feelings about that. But I think it's always really cool how as much flash as everybody else is trying to get.
Yeah.
With all these different kind of jerseys and stuff. The ones that kind of stick to their guns and say, we'll let the flash be through our play. We'll keep it classy, keep it classic, I guess is the way to put it. I've always been a big fan of that, whether it be on the NFL level or the college level.
I agree. And one thing I always have to bring up, we're kind of deviating from our topic, but that's okay, is Georgia Southern, when they played Alabama, our best-selling T-shirt, Clint, to this day is the Nick Saban quote.
The run shit through a tin horn.
I mean, I'm not kidding. It is. When I went, so I graduated in 2023, so I started in 2019. When I got down there, the first thing I noticed was, oh my gosh, this quote is everywhere. It's in buildings. It's on the sides of buildings. It's in classrooms. And to this day, the best-selling T-shirt is the Nick Saban quote. It really put us on the map.
In here, that's kind of, that came to like represent everything that Nick Saban would be arguing as far as taking your opponent seriously. Like, obviously Alabama still won that game, but I mean, it's like they gave Alabama's defense, which was supposed to be really, really good, all fits, absolute fits. And so I think just moving forward, that was kind of the rallying cry for Nick Saban, and be like, hey, we've seen this before. And all it takes is one team being able to catch us off guard on both sides of the football, where you can end up getting beat by a team like this. You got to take everybody seriously. We're not going to look past anybody. So I think that Nick Saban, I mean, granted, I'm speculating, but I'm sure there's a lot of respect there from that, because I know that there was a lot of respect that he had for their performance after that game, for sure.
And it was the triple option. And we got away from that while I was in college. So
yeah, it was Tom. Like, it's one of those things where you can catch some teams off with it. A lot of the military, because it's very tough to get really good quarterback play, like find a quarterback that's also willing to attend the military academy. So the thought is, okay, you don't have to recruit an elite quarterback. You just got to recruit an elite athlete that can play the quarterback position, throw it well enough, and you can have success. And on a short notice, it is very tough. I mean, when we played my sophomore year, when we won the state championship, in the state title game, we played Eufaula. And Jarrell Jernigan was their quarterback. He ended up playing receiver for Troy and was a third-round pick to play for the Giants, and was in the NFL for quite a while. Courtney Upshaw was their tight end / outside linebacker. They had some really good players, but they ran the triple option. Like I said, Jernigan was a college wide receiver, but he was playing high school quarterback. Couldn't throw the ball great. Could throw it well enough, though. And I remember that entire week, just as far as discipline, and just everybody has to do your job. You can't, the second, if someone else isn't doing their job, the second you stop trying to do yours and make up and do theirs, they're going to tag you, and then it's going to be your fault. So there was such a trust process when you play teams like that. There's a lot of trust that goes into being able to defend those teams effectively. And I think that's there's not enough. A lot of times you don't have enough disciplined guys to play those kind of teams. And so Alabama that day wasn't playing very disciplined, and Georgia Southern didn't pay for it.
Speaking of discipline, let's talk about the young guys in the tight end room. What are you kind of seeing from them as they begin, this process of playing tight end in Alabama?
Well, I love the combination of guys they got with Caleb Edwards, kind of being that bigger bodied wide inline option. Now, I think he's balanced. I think he's got a better athletic profile than given credit for. Will be a much more effective pass catcher. I think as far as balanced options are concerned, this is the best tight end that Alabama has recruited and signed in quite a while. Maybe, O.J. Howard ended up being a very good blocking tight end, was underutilized as a pass catcher, but everybody knew his talent as a pass catcher. So I'm not saying that Caleb Edwards is O.J. Howard, but that's the last time I can really look at a tight end prospect and say, man, I mean, when Amari Black had his question marks as a blocker, last year, Caleb Odom had his question marks, like his transition to tight end, being an inline blocker. Jay Lindsey, really good inline blocker, but very limited upside as far as being a pass catcher. So, Caleb Edwards is really exciting to me because he brings that element. Now, Marshall Pritchett's more of your H. He played a lot of receiver, and then he started kind of making the transition to be a tight end, and he's going to be a guy that you move around, create some mismatches. He's going to primarily be a pass catcher, which I love in this Kalen DeBoer offense. But he also really continued to improve as a blocker. And so I love the combination. Like, you got your Y, you got your H, Kalen DeBoer at Washington and other places, he's liked utilizing both and having effective options at both. And these guys both fit those profiles. So I don't think Alabama could have done much better as far as the tight end group they signed in this class.
Let's move on to safeties. But before we get there, remember, covercrimson.com is where you can find such valuable information. We love to have you here. When you're looking at the channel, make sure you like and subscribe and comment. We try to get back to all of them. We enjoy the conversations that we have. So remember, covercrimson.com. And that's where you can also follow all of us at Cover Crimson on X, Instagram, you name it. We're there, and we want to serve you guys as we, enter spring practice here in the next couple of weeks, even though we're still in January, but it kind of feels like it's starting to pick up, even though the season literally ended last week. Safeties, Clint. Oh, wait, no, we have to do your 5-star rating.
We do. And granted, I really like this group. I really do. Getting Danny Lewis back, you get, once again, the Y and the H. I think at the top, you're in a good spot. I think as far as the depth that you've brought in, you're in a good spot on that front. Jay Lindsey's another Y option where it's like, I think at worst, you get a guy who can be one of those sneaky pass catchers where if the defense is sleeping on him, you can, I think, you throwing the football, he's probably not going to do much after the catch, but he's going to catch it. Okay. I like that. But as far as grades, I'm going to give it a, 3.5 stars. And the reason I'm going to go 3.5 is while I think Danny Lewis is in a really good place, and I think he's going to be one of Alabama's biggest breakout players on offense, I don't know that for certain. And you just lost Robbie Oates. You just lost C.J. Dupree. You obviously lost Ty Lockwood to Boston College. So it's like you've lost some players at this position, but I also think Alabama's in a pretty good place. So I won't go, I don't think it's like 3-star where you start to get I would say 3-star for me is like, okay, they're okay, but there's some concerns here. I wouldn't say I'm concerned. I just think there's enough questions where I need to see some stuff in the spring.
Okay. So you just need to see a little more. And on Cover Crimson, I let Clint have the liberty to give us some percentages, if you will, on stars. So we don't do whole stars here. And I think that that's okay because you can kind of get more of a picture of why Clint is rating things what they are. With that being said, we're going to do the same thing with safeties. You guys heard me, covercrimson.com for all of this information there. Clint, let's jump into it.
Let's do it. Lewis and Malachi Moore, do you think that's a pretty big deal?
I do. And I think from a leadership standpoint, I think his mentality and what he brought to Alabama, he definitely was a Saban guy, and he learned and developed under other Saban level players. So that discipline, and I know the Vanderbilt game, there were some issues there, and I will commend Malachi for how he handled that situation. I feel like that was honestly handled extremely well on his part and along with Alabama. So his apology to the media, I was the one that asked him the question. And so we had the video on the next round and at Cover Crimson, and he was extremely well spoken about it, took accountability. And I think that helped him in a lot of ways because he took a situation that clearly was not to the standard, owned it, and moved on. And really, it wasn't discussed much more after that. I don't know what your opinion is on that, but I felt like that was kind of put to bed because of that accountability that was taken. So I will always commend Malachi Moore for that, just simply how he handled the media, because we're a tough bunch. Imagine you have a situation like that happen, and that, I guess that was on Tuesday or Wednesday, you're having to face a dozen reporters that are 2 feet in front of you. There's no podium, you're not standing behind anything, and that's the first thing that they're going to ask about. I do think they're going to miss his production, and I think the intensity that he brought to games and just the leadership is where I'm kind of landing. I don't think that this room is behind by any means. I don't think that it's a major point of concern, but I do think there's going to be a hole left by Moore.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, is the love for Alabama.
Yes.
Like just the passion for the university. I think that could be kind of infectious to other guys. And you're losing Tyler Booker on the offensive side. He felt that way. Malachi Moore on defense. So I think from a leadership standpoint, I was tough on him when the Vanderbilt situation happened. I made a video and I said they need to discipline him. Granted, I didn't think it was their job to tell me what they did to discipline him. It could totally be done behind the scenes, but I just thought from a team perspective, you're Kalen DeBoer, you're trying to come in here and earn guys respect. You're replacing the greatest college football coach of all time, one of the greatest coaches, period, of all time. And, I just thought that you need to send a message because you can't have that stuff be happening on the field. But I also always wanted to recognize how I felt like he handled that moving forward. He owned it when you guys asked the question. He took accountability, which is exactly what you need to do. And we didn't see it again. We saw passion. I don't think you could see much more of a passion at Malachi Moore than that Auburn game.
Right.
But he handled it in a more professional way. And so that was growth to me. And so, always give guys credit when you see them grow. But you don't like the fact that, Keon Sabb went down when he did. You don't like the fact that Malachi Moore missed the bowl game against Michigan because it kind of his end came kind of abruptly.
It did.
So you didn't really get to give him probably a proper send off like he deserved. But what those two things did is, if that doesn't happen, it's possible Keon Sabb's moving on to the NFL. Don't know that for sure, but through his injury, we learned Bray Hubbard is in fact a really, really good player.
Yeah.
And so you're getting Keon Sabb back, who you feel like was making some really good strides as far as his transition to Alabama's defense. You're getting Bray Hubbard back, who showed tremendous flashes. Was tied for a team lead with 3 interceptions. And I mean, he only started half the season.
Right.
So I think he finished like number 11 or 12 in snaps played, and he led the team in interceptions. So that's a big deal. And so that's where really, and that Zay Mincy has a lot of, strong traits because he started the bowl game and did some tremendous things, especially coming up and stopping the run, just showing a willingness and physicality against the run. And you got guys like Ivan Taylor, Ike Taylor's son, who's going to be coming in as a top 100 recruit in this past recruiting cycle, or this current recruiting cycle, I guess. And I feel like he's a guy with the football IQ and everything else and the versatility. I think he can contribute pretty early. And I don't think it's going to be as a starter or even a huge rotational piece, but I think he's going to be able to provide some depth. And then at Husky, you're getting Red Morgan back. He should have another full off season to get bigger and stronger. And he's already played a season. And he understands what it takes. You got Deshaun Jones, who's probably going to be starting at that spot. He's really a corner. But, while I hate that Alabama lost to Malachi Moore, I actually think the room is still in a really good place.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. And I think that's what's interesting about this. I think Bray Hubbard was so fun to watch down the stretch, too. He really was making an impact in games. We talked about the interceptions that he had. And I remember, I guess it was in November. And basically I was able to tweet out like another game with a Bray Hubbard interception. And I was just retweeting it from the week before. And it was so fun in post game too. He's such a relaxed, very laid back kind of guy. And I want to say he played quarterback in high school.
He did. He was only a quarterback. So we didn't know how the transition to safety would go.
I mean, what kind of conversation was that? Like, hey, we know you're a quarterback, but we think that you'd be really good in this spot. Like, and
Nick Saban, that's the beauty of old Nick. I mean, he saw him in a camp and saw the athleticism. Is like, you know what? I think you can do it, man. Some people thought, is he going to start off as a quarterback? I think Saban had safety all the way. And obviously, once again, Nick Saban knows a thing or two about football.
He does. And that was crazy to hear just like his background and then what led him ultimately to what he's doing now. But I think that another year under his belt, I feel like he also, this is just my opinion and I'll be interested and I'll keep an eye on this, is I feel like he has some leadership qualities that I think we'll see him step into a little more along with Keon Sabb. And I'm curious how in tandem they're going to work. But then you mentioned Red Morgan too. Who do you feel like will make the most strides this season in the safety room?
I already feel like Bray Hubbard's in a pretty good place. Now, granted, I think as he gets more, like he seems like one of those guys that just soaks up football.
Yes.
And so like I really think not only is he a much better athlete than given credit for, I think he's a balanced option, good ball skills, run support, all that stuff. But I think he's going to be one of those guys where as he plays more football and he gets more comfortable playing the position, he's really going to be able to start picking up on some things that offenses are doing. He's going to probably be able to bait quarterbacks a little bit more. So I think the ceiling for him to continue to grow is up there, and that's why I'm so excited about him. I think Keon Sabb has NFL traits and has an NFL future. But to me, I think there's a reason Red Morgan was such a massive part of, immediately kind of getting into the mix. Like back in the spring, he's a true freshman. He just gets on campus and he's working with like the second team defense and the first team defense pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I think what really hurt him is once the season rolled around, which we saw this coming, was the lack of size. Now granted, there was also some struggles as far as understanding what he needed to do in coverage. He did give up some cover busts, but he's a true freshman. He's growing, he's learning. I think the most important thing for him is just to continue to get bigger and stronger. And the more he can do that, I think he's going to end up making a huge jump. Now, granted, I'm not projecting him as a starter. I like Deshaun Jones there a lot. But based off of where he was at as a freshman, what I know, how I know the coaching staff feels about him, I think that there's the most room for him to grow. And if he can get bigger and stronger, maybe, shows up next year and he's playing at like 188, 187, something like that, when I think he was playing closer to like 175 this year. I think that's going to make a tremendous amount of difference on top of the valuable experience he got this year.
I'm curious to hear what your star rating is on this. What are you feeling?
I feel good about it. I feel really good, actually, to a point where I'm going to go a 4.25. Wow. And that might be higher than some people think, especially when you lose a guy like Malachi Moore. But that just speaks to anytime that I'm like evaluating positions, I look at not only the returning production, the returning like snap, that includes snaps played and all that stuff. You look at like the talent, you look at the depth of the talent. Like, okay, let's say Bray Hubbard goes down. How do I feel about where that position would be at? Okay, let's say two guys go down. How would I feel about it? I think, and granted a lot, and Cam Howard's a guy that we haven't even mentioned, but they brought him over from Charlotte, true freshman, played a lot for Charlotte, obviously didn't play a lot for Alabama this year. He was making a huge jump up in competition. I like him as well. I currently have Ivan Taylor jumping him on the depth chart. Maybe Cam Howard ends up proving me wrong, and I regret saying that, but just for me, I think Ivan Taylor is a hell of a talent, one of my favorite players that Alabama signed in this class. But I think that you can run, if Ivan Taylor, I think you can at least run three deep at safety. And if Ivan Taylor is who I think he is, which is a guy who's ready to contribute fairly early on, I think your safety four becomes stronger. And that, if something happens to a couple of guys and he has to play, not saying he won't have some freshman mistakes, but I think Alabama, I think he would be one of the better safety fours in all of college football. I'll put it that way. And then if you had to work even further, it's like, hey, you can find a lot worse as far as safety fives and safety sixes than, Cam Howard and Drake Kirkpatrick Jr. So obviously you wouldn't want to work in that depth if you can avoid it. But I like the top. I like as far as like depth pieces, like Zay Mincy is a guy like this is where this position's at. I think Zay Mincy is ready to be a starter, or he's pretty darn close. And yet I can't find a starting spot for him because, so that just tells me there's a starting caliber player on Alabama's bench. And he will probably be rotating in and getting and seeing snaps. But anytime you start doing that, I can't go anything lower than a 4. But with this position, I got to go a 4.25.
Clint mentioned that depth chart. You can find that on covercrimson.com. I'm sure Alabama loves us making those depth charts, but you guys love them. So Clint does them for you. Remember, you can get $25 off your annual subscription right now. We would love to have you over there to start conversations. We talk all things Alabama football. We also have some side conversations. We talk about basketball. We talk about really everything in between. Poker is being brought up these last few days. We don't have poker tonight, Clint, so I won't have an update for you on Wednesday. But
that's unfortunate. We'll just have to talk more about our backgrounds.
I know. I will do some more poker reading. I have 2 books I'm working towards. I finished one of them, so I have 1 book I'm working towards, working through. So we will not have a Wednesday poker update this week, but we'll be back to normally scheduled programming on that front next week.
I'm excited to see it. The poker thing's very intriguing, a lot more intriguing to me than people realize, just because I have a history of playing poker as well. And I'll live vicariously through you and your growth. And hopefully we can get you the World Series of Poker at some point.
I would love that. My TikTok algorithm has turned into like poker highlights, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say that on air. But We're all family here on Cover Crimson. If you've made it this far in the video, which I hope you have, let us know your favorite poker hand below in the comments. And then let us know what your thoughts are on the safeties and tight ends room. Every week, I join Clint Monday and Wednesdays at 9:30 a.m. Central, and we're going live. So expect those. Work us into your routine. Have your coffee with us on Mondays and Wednesdays, and we will talk all things Alabama football. Clint, anything to add as we wrap?
No, AK did ask about the depth chart real quick. He said he saw it. Wasn't a fan, to be honest. That's totally fine. We don't have to agree on everything. Why is Lawson backing up Green Hill or Hill Green? I always say Green Hill. Real simple. I don't know how healthy Deontay Lawson's going to be. We do know that he's going to be missing the spring that has already been announced. Mm-hmm. And, he tore his ACL, and from what I understand, a decently bad tear in late November. So will he be back for the start of the season? It is very possible. I think that's the goal sometime in fall camp, but it's going to take him a while to kind of adjust back to playing. I mean, how close is he going to be to 100%? He might be available, but that doesn't mean that he's going to be. And I just don't think Deontay Lawson at 75 or 80% is better than, who I thought it was a very good, effective linebacker in Nakai Hill Green this past season. So this is a week one projection. Doesn't mean that he's going to keep the starting job over Lawson. I went ahead and included Lawson in the depth chart projections because I do think he's technically going to be back. But I think because of the play of Hill Green and Jefferson, I think you're going to have plenty of time to let Lawson kind of get his bearings back a little bit. And then as far as he also asked, why is the two-star Draylon Washington listed ahead of Richard Young? I had two running back positions because just listing six guys in a row, it just looked terrible on the graphic. So I'm like, well, there's some time where you'll see some 21 personnel. So we'll list it out that way. And just Draylon is kind of like more of I had like the early down guys that, granted, they're all 3-down players. But, Draylon with his pass catching ability, his upside as a pass protector. I kind of had him as like a change of pace, third down option. I put those as one. And then the ones that are kind of going to be the main guys. So Richard Young, actually, I have ahead of Draylon Washington. I think he'll be RB2, directly behind Jam Miller. Washington will be number 3. And I think, I could be wrong. It might be Daniel Hill, but I also have AK Deer as RB4. So hopefully that makes sense to you. That's all I got. Emily, you got anything else?
No, I don't. AK, you can watch our running back breakdown. We did that video. That was last week. You can find some more information there. But as always, we appreciate you guys. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. And we will see you Wednesday morning at 9:30 a.m. Central live.